You've heard of kings and queens, but what about fake ones? Tonight, we're diving into people who just declared themselves important. From an American emperor in San Francisco to princes who never existed. From fake surgeons cutting into real soldiers to teenage doctors in Florida. From mail-order lords and lairds to online knights with PayPal receipts. These aren't movie plots, these are real people who got believed. We'll see how a kitchen boy got crowned King of England. How con artists sold imaginary kingdoms, royal bloodlines, even the Eiffel Tower. By the end, you'll never look at fancy titles the same. Emperor Norton I declared himself ruler of America and Mexico. San Francisco once treated a completely fake emperor like royalty. In the late 1850s, Joshua Norton went bankrupt and snapped. Instead of disappearing, he declared himself Emperor of the United States. Local newspapers printed his crazy decrees as if they were official. He ordered Congress dissolved, demanded a bridge over the bay, everything. Bars and restaurants honored his self-printed banknotes for food and drinks. Police once arrested him, then apologized and saluted him afterward. When Norton died in 1880, thousands of San Franciscans attended his funeral. The city quietly admitted their joke emperor had become a real symbol. Con man Count Victor Lustig, who twice sold the Eiffel Tower. Paris officials never sold the Eiffel Tower, but Victor Lustig nearly did. In the 1920s, he posed as a French government official in Paris. Lustig claimed the tower's metal was corroding and would be secretly scrapped. He invited scrap dealers to a fancy hotel for a fake auction. One dealer paid him a fortune, then stayed silent from embarrassment. Realizing he'd gotten away once, Lustig tried the stunt again. He later conned gangsters and allegedly tricked Al Capone in Chicago. American agents finally caught him passing counterfeit bills across the country. The man who sold the Eiffel Tower died in prison, still smiling. Frank Abagnale, the fake pilot doctor and lawyer legend. Before he turned 21, Frank Abagnale lived several borrowed lives. In the 1960s, he first posed as a Pan Am co-pilot. He walked through airports in uniform, cashing fake payroll checks with confidence. Passengers asked for autographs while he actually feared boarding the planes. Later, he pretended to be a Georgia doctor, bluffing through hospital meetings. He even passed a bar exam and posed as a lawyer. Abagnale constantly moved cities, changing roles whenever suspicion grew too strong. Eventually, the FBI caught him in France after years of chasing. He later helped investigators fight fraud, turning his scams into cautionary stories. Ferdinand Demara, the great impostor who performed surgeries at sea. Ferdinand Demara didn't just fake titles, he faked life or death skills. In the Korean War, he posed as Surgeon Joseph Sear on a ship. When wounded Canadian soldiers arrived, the impostor faced real battlefield injuries. He quietly locked himself in, reading medical textbooks before each operation. Amazingly, all his patients reportedly survived the emergency procedures. His fraud unraveled when the real Joseph Sear saw a newspaper article. Demara had already impersonated monks, prison wardens, and teachers across North America. He became a minor celebrity, proof that confidence sometimes outruns competence. Gregor MacGregor selling investors on his imaginary kingdom of Poyais. Hundreds of people once sailed from Britain to a country that never existed. In the early 1800s, Scottish soldier Gregor MacGregor invented the kingdom Poyais. He printed maps, a constitution, and land certificates for this fake paradise. MacGregor claimed Poyais lay in Central America with fertile land and gold. Investors bought bonds, and settlers prepared for a new tropical life. When ships arrived, they found jungle, mosquitoes, and absolutely no infrastructure. People died from disease and hunger while MacGregor stayed comfortably in Europe. Authorities realized the entire kingdom had lived only on paper. Despite the disaster, MacGregor kept reinventing himself and dodging serious punishment. Occult healer Count Cagliostro who fooled courts across Europe. Before Europe obsessed over stage magicians, it had Count Cagliostro. In the late 18th century, Giuseppe Balsamo reinvented himself as mystical nobility. He promised alchemy, eternal youth, and magical healing to desperate aristocrats. In Paris and London, he held candlelit rituals with exotic props. His name later appeared in the scandalous affair of the diamond necklace. Mysterious Count of Saint-Germain passing as ageless European noble. European courts once whispered about a man who supposedly never aged. The Count of Saint-Germain floated through 18th century salons like smoke. He spoke multiple languages, played music, and hinted at secret ancient knowledge. Some claimed he'd known kings centuries earlier and discovered immortality elixirs. In Paris, he dazzled people by casually talking about long-past historical events. He rarely mentioned his birthplace or parents, deepening the mystery around him. Rumors said he died, yet later sightings appeared across Europe. Occult groups eventually adopted him as a wandering immortal legend. The real man vanished, but his fake timeless title still lingers. Self-proclaimed Princess Caraboo who tricked an entire English town. One quiet English town once fell completely for a made-up princess. In 1817, a young woman appeared in Gloucestershire speaking an unknown language. She wore exotic clothes and drew strange symbols, refusing normal conversation. Locals assumed she was royalty from some distant island kingdom. A wealthy local family hosted her as Princess Caraboo in their home. A language expert even claimed he partially understood her invented speech. Then, a Bristol woman recognized her from earlier work as a servant. The supposed princess was actually Mary Baker, an imaginative impostor. Embarrassed townsfolk realized they'd built an entire fantasy around wishful thinking. Legendary lost princess Anastasia claimed that fooled much of Europe. For decades, Europe wondered whether a murdered Russian princess had survived. After the Russian Revolution, rumors spread that Grand Duchess Anastasia escaped execution. In the 1920s, a woman calling herself Anna Anderson appeared in Germany. She claimed she'd survived the Romanov massacre and lost her memories. Supporters pointed to scars and family stories that seemed strangely convincing. Some Romanov relatives believed her, others called her an obvious impostor. Court cases dragged on for years, arguing about her real identity. DNA testing many decades later finally disproved the Anastasia claim completely. By then, the legend had already inspired books, movies, and musical fantasies. Perkin Warbeck pretender who convinced Europe he was a prince. In the late 1400s, a young man nearly rewrote English succession. Perkin Warbeck claimed he was Richard, Duke of York, a lost prince. He insisted he'd survived the mysterious disappearance of the princes in the Tower. Foreign rulers in France, Scotland, and Burgundy decided to support his claim. They treated him like real royalty, offering money, troops, and recognition. The Tichborne claimant butcher who nearly inherited an English baronetcy. Victorian England almost handed a huge estate to a man from a pub. When wealthy heir Roger Tichborne disappeared at sea, his family lost hope. Years later, a butcher from Australia claimed he was the missing aristocrat. He traveled to England, heavier and rougher, but greeted as returning Roger. Lady Tichborne, the grieving mother, swore this coarse stranger was her son. Servants and locals split, some convinced, others whispering about obvious differences. A sensational trial examined accents, tattoos, schooling, and childhood memories. The claimant was eventually exposed as Arthur Orton, an ordinary London butcher. He went to prison, but the public loved the audacity of his act. Lambert Simnel kitchen boy crowned as fake English king. England once crowned a teenage pretender in a full cathedral ceremony. In 1487, Lambert Simnel, probably a kitchen boy, became a political pawn. Supporters of the old Yorkist cause needed a prince-shaped figurehead. They trained Simnel to pose as Edward, Earl of Warwick. In Dublin, Irish nobles even crowned him King Edward VI with ceremony. An army of mercenaries sailed to England to defend his fake crown. Henry VII defeated them at the Battle of Stoke Field. Instead of executing Simnel, the king gave him work in royal kitchens. The former king spent adulthood serving real royalty food and wine. James Strang, the self-crowned Mormon king of Beaver Island. One American religious leader actually crowned himself king on a Great Lake. In the mid-1800s, James Strang led a splinter Mormon community in Michigan. He moved his followers to Beaver Island in northern Lake Michigan. There, Strang wore royal robes and placed a crown on himself. He issued royal decrees and controlled land, marriages, and local politics. Non-Mormon fishermen and mainland officials grew increasingly hostile toward his rule. Eventually, angry rivals shot Strang on a dock in Michigan. His followers scattered, and locals forced remaining believers off the island. The self-proclaimed king vanished, leaving only scattered ruins and old photographs. Theodor von Neuhoff Gambler briefly accepted as king of Corsica. Corsica once gambled on a wandering adventurer and lost badly. In 1736, German gambler Theodor von Neuhoff arrived promising foreign support. He told Corsican rebels he could bring weapons, money, and recognition. Desperate for help against Genoa, they crowned him King Theodore I. He printed coins, created orders of chivalry, and issued royal decrees. But promised foreign aid never materialized, and Corsicans quickly felt betrayed. Within months, he fled the island, chased by creditors and enemies. He spent the rest of his life in debt across Europe. King Theodore finally died in London, buried without royal ceremony or crown. Prince Leonard of Hutt River, who created his own micronation. One Australian farmer responded to taxes by declaring independence from Australia. In 1970, Leonard Castley announced his wheat property as the Principality of Hutt River. He styled himself Prince Leonard and published letters challenging federal authorities. On his farm in Western Australia, he issued stamps and passports. Curious tourists drove out to see the homemade royal residence. Officials mostly ignored him, treating the principality as a quirky protest. For decades, Leonard hosted visitors while posing in military-style uniforms. Legal disputes over taxes eventually pushed the tiny realm toward closure. Still, Hutt River became a model story for modern DIY micronations. Lord Timothy Dexter, self-made aristocrat with zero real education or nobility. New England merchants once watched a barely literate neighbor accidentally get rich. In the late 1700s, Timothy Dexter bought a fancy mansion in Massachusetts. He insisted people call him Lord Dexter, despite having no noble title. His fortune grew from ridiculous-sounding trades that oddly worked out. He shipped warming bedpans to tropical islands where they became ladles. He sent wool mittens to the Caribbean, which got resold to Siberia. Dexter even wrote a chaotic book without punctuation, then added commas separately. Locals mocked him, yet his weird bets kept paying off. His self-appointed title survived mostly because everyone enjoyed telling his stories. George Psalmanazar, the European impostor who invented exotic Formosa royalty. 18th century London readers craved exotic stories, and George Psalmanazar delivered. He arrived in Europe claiming to be from Formosa, modern Taiwan. Psalmanazar invented an alphabet, religion, and customs no one could verify. He described cannibal rituals, underground houses, and golden palaces with confidence. The English church even considered sending missionaries to his fabricated homeland. He dined with scholars who treated him as a visiting nobleman. Eventually, explorers' real reports exposed his stories as pure fiction. Psalmanazar later confessed and spent life quietly as a translator. Still, his fake Formosan prince persona became a classic hoax in travel literature. Colonel Sanders, whose Kentucky colonel title was purely honorary. The man on the KFC bucket was never a military colonel. Harlan Sanders received the title Kentucky Colonel from the state's governor. It was an honorary award, not a rank earned on battlefields. Sanders leaned into it, growing his famous goatee and white suit. He posed for photos like a Southern gentleman from another era. The title added instant authority to his fried chicken roadside franchise. Customers assumed colonel meant discipline, quality, and maybe secret military recipes. Behind the branding, he was a persistent businessman with many failed ventures. The fake-sounding colonel rank became one of advertising's most recognizable uniforms. Cassie Chadwick, who claimed to be Andrew Carnegie's secret heiress. At the turn of the 20th century, American bankers met a mysterious woman. Cassie Chadwick quietly hinted she was the secret daughter of Andrew Carnegie. She arranged a chance visit to Carnegie's mansion, leaving with forged notes. As rumors spread, bankers believed she'd inherit an unimaginable fortune soon. They showered her with loans, trusting future Carnegie money as collateral. Cassie decorated her Ohio home with luxury bought on pure bluff. One skeptical banker finally checked directly with Andrew Carnegie himself. He bluntly denied knowing any secret heiress with her name. Chadwick was arrested, and reporters called her the Queen of Ohio Swindlers. Helga de la Brache, pretending to be a lost Swedish princess. Aurora Ljungberg reinvented herself as Helga de la Brache in Stockholm. She claimed to be the hidden daughter of King Gustav IV. According to her story, loyal servants had secretly raised her in exile. Sympathetic aristocrats granted her pensions, apartments, and constant social support. Officials even opened investigations into her claims about the deposed king. Eventually, documents and timelines showed her story simply didn't fit history. The government cut her pension, and public sympathy quickly faded. Helga spent later years quietly, remembered mainly as Sweden's almost princess impostor. Sarah Wilson convict who passed herself off as a princess. Colonial America once hosted a runaway servant claiming royal blood. Sarah Wilson had worked as a maid to a lady at court. After escaping her master, she reinvented herself as a visiting English princess. She used fancy manners and court gossip to impress provincial elites. Families hosted her, offered carriages, and showered her with expensive gifts. She promised royal favors once she returned to London after her tour. Eventually, news of the escaped convict reached her new admirers. The supposed princess vanished back into obscurity, leaving angry hosts behind. Dreadnought hoaxers, posing as Abyssinian princes, fooled the Royal Navy. In 1910, pranksters turned Britain's proudest battleship into a stage for farce. Members of the Bloomsbury Circle decided to test military formality with disguises. They dressed as Abyssinian princes, complete with dark makeup and fake beards. Using forged telegrams, they requested an official naval tour of HMS Dreadnought. Officers rolled out red carpets and military bands for their important guests. The princes spoke absurd mock language, occasionally shouting the word bunga. Nobody on board ever recognized the prank, including a disguised Virginia Woolf. Newspapers exploded with laughter once the hoaxers confessed to reporters. The Royal Navy felt humiliated, but hadn't technically broken any security rules. Man who faked being a Rockefeller to enter high society. Modern New York high society once embraced a man with a borrowed surname. In the 1990s, Christian Gerhardt's writer posed as Clark Rockefeller. He claimed vague ties to the famous oil dynasty, but avoided specifics. Wealthy acquaintances accepted him at art galleries and elite private clubs. He married a successful executive who believed his carefully curated backstory. Over time, small inconsistencies about his education and family piled up. A bitter custody dispute finally pushed investigators to dig into his past. They uncovered multiple aliases and connections to an old California disappearance. Fake Saudi prince who scammed hotels while wearing diamond-studded robes. One Florida con artist discovered luxury hotels roll out carpets for royalty. Anthony Gignac spent years pretending to be a Saudi prince in America. He wore flowing robes, heavy jewelry, and drove expensive rented cars. Hotels upgraded him to penthouses, trusting huge bills would be settled later. He boasted about oil deals and friendships with real Middle Eastern royals. Staff rushed to serve at him, ignoring obvious warning signs and unpaid invoices. Eventually, a suspicious investor noticed he ate pork, unlikely for a devout prince. Investigators then untangled layers of fake identities and bogus investment promises. Gignac's royal fantasy finally ended with a long federal prison sentence. Social media sheikhs renting jets to pose as Gulf royalty. Today, some fake titles are crafted with filters instead of forged documents. Influencers in Europe and the Middle East have posed as wealthy sheikhs. They rent sports cars, private jets, and luxury suites just for photos. On Instagram, every shot suggests endless oil money and royal connections. Behind the scenes, many struggle with debt and unpaid rental bills. Some use the illusion to lure investors into bogus business opportunities. Others simply chase followers, hoping fame will eventually become real fortune. Occasionally, hotel staff expose the staged glamour when payments bounce. Posing as a bush pilot captain to impress and defraud investors. Remote aviation has always carried a rugged mystique, easy to exploit. Several fraudsters have posed as experienced bush pilot captains in frontier regions. They bragged about flying dangerous routes across Alaska or northern Canada. Investors handed over money for supposed air taxi companies or mining logistics. Some imposters barely knew basic flight rules, relying on rented planes. Others forged logbooks and licenses, counting on distance to hide lies. When aircraft went missing or businesses collapsed, authorities started asking questions. Investigations uncovered fake training records and non-existent maintenance operations entirely. The myth of the fearless bush captain turned out mostly paperwork and bravado. Pope Joan's story of a secret woman pope many believed. For centuries, Europeans repeated a story about a woman secretly becoming pope. According to the legend, Joan disguised herself as a man in church. She supposedly rose through the ranks, admired for intelligence and piety. Eventually, she was elected pope, ruling from Rome without anyone suspecting. The tale says her identity was exposed during a public procession. Some versions claim she went into labor suddenly on a Roman street. Medieval writers debated whether this scandalous story was history or moral lesson. Modern historians see almost no solid evidence for a real Pope Joan. Still, the myth lingers as a reminder of hidden ambition and fear. Self-styled Pope Michael running a tiny papal court in Kansas. One American man decided the Vatican had chosen the wrong pope entirely. In the 1990s, David Bawden gathered a handful of traditionalist Catholics. They elected him pope in a modest ceremony in Kansas. He took the name Pope Michael and set up a micro-Vatican. His papal court operated from his family home with simple furnishings. He issued statements online, condemning modern changes in the Catholic Church. Very few followers recognized his papacy, but he never stepped down. Neighbors sometimes saw reporters visiting his small Midwestern Holy See. His story shows how grand titles can shrink inside an ordinary living room. The Lambeth degrees that let clergy call themselves doctors overnight. Not every doctor in a collar spent years doing academic research. Anglican archbishops once had the power to grant Lambeth degrees. These church awards could legally function like university doctorates in Britain. Some clergy and church workers received them for service rather than study. Suddenly, they could sign documents as doctor without defending a thesis. Critics argued the titles blurred lines between academic and honorary qualifications. Supporters said the degrees recognized real contributions to theology and ministry. The practice continues, but with more careful explanations and clearer categories. It's a reminder that some official-sounding titles are more ceremonial than scholarly. Mail order, doctors of divinity selling, instant reverend titles worldwide. 20th century magazines quietly offered something wilder than miracle diet pills. Mail-order religious schools promised impressive diplomas without attending real classes. Some people framed the certificates and demanded others call them doctor. A few used these titles to boost authority in tiny congregations. Others just wanted to amaze friends with suddenly upgraded letterheads. Regulators later cracked down on the sketchiest diploma mills and fake seminaries. Still, some older ministers proudly keep their mail-order doctorates on walls. The fine print usually revealed the school was just a rented mailbox. Universal Life Church ordinations turning total strangers into wedding officiants. If a friend married you in their backyard, this church might be involved. The Universal Life Church began offering instant ordination to almost anyone online. With a few clicks, people became ministers in minutes, free of charge. Newly minted reverends could legally officiate weddings in many American states. Millions signed up, from pranksters to sincere spiritual seekers and hobby officiants. Some couples loved the idea of a best friend leading ceremonies. Courts sometimes debated whether such easy ordinations counted as legitimate clergy. Over time, many jurisdictions quietly accepted the church's paperwork anyway. The result is a world where sacred titles arrive by email confirmation. Teenage Dr. Love, who ran a fake medical practice in Florida. In modern Florida, a teenager opened a clinic before finishing high school. Malachi Love Robinson called himself a doctor and wore a white coat. He rented office space in West Palm Beach and decorated professionally. Patients came in believing they were seeing a licensed holistic physician. Authorities said he gave questionable treatments and even examined undercover officers. Hospitals reported him for wandering wards in scrubs, pretending to belong. Eventually, police arrested him for practicing medicine without a license. News outlets nicknamed him Dr. Love, turning the case into late-night fodder. His story showed how easily a lab coat can override common sense. Souvenir Scottish lairds who bought 1 square foot of land. Owning a Scottish estate sounds impressive until you see the plot size. Various companies began selling souvenir deeds for tiny Scottish land parcels. Buyers received certificates granting them honorary laird or lady titles. The land itself was often just 1 square foot of hillside. Tourists loved the idea of becoming minor Scottish nobility overnight. Lawyers quietly pointed out these titles carried no real legal status. Most owners treated the papers as novelty gifts or fun decorations. Nature reserves sometimes benefited since purchases supported conservation of the land. Still, introductions as Laird of Glencoe usually hide a very small patch. Micronation of Sealand handing out Lord and Lady titles online. Off the English coast, an abandoned sea fort became a country with nobles. In the 1960s, Paddy Roy Bates occupied a wartime platform in the North Sea. He declared it the Principality of Sealand, complete with flag and constitution. Over time, Sealand began selling noble titles to supporters worldwide. People bought Baron, Count, Lord, or Lady certificates as conversation pieces. The platform itself remained a rusting metal structure pounded by waves. A fire and construction accidents nearly destroyed the tiny nation at times. Yet Sealand still markets passports, titles, and coins to curious fans. It's probably the only country whose aristocracy mostly exists in desk drawers. Online knighthood mills selling grand crosses of imaginary orders. Not every knight posing online has ever met a real monarch. Some groups created impressive-sounding orders with Latin names and ornate badges. For a donation, members received medals, robes, and knightly certificates. Websites showed photos of ceremonies in rented halls and hotel ballrooms. Participants pinned medals on each other, promising charity work and brotherhood. Actual governments rarely recognized these chivalric clubs as official orders. Critics called them vanity projects that monetized people's hunger for status. Supporters insisted they raised real money for local charitable projects. Either way, the Sir title often came attached to a PayPal receipt. Author Lobsang Rampa selling books as a fake reincarnated monk. Mid-century readers devoured spiritual adventures supposedly written by a Tibetan Lama. Books under the name Lobsang Rampa described monasteries, astral travel, and secret rituals. Investigators later revealed he was Cyril Hoskin, a plumber from Devon. He insisted his soul had transferred into Hoskin after a mystical accident. Tibetan scholars pointed out numerous errors in his descriptions of religion. Despite exposure, his books continued selling to fascinated Western readers. He moved to Canada, still defending his extraordinary life story. The titles stayed on shelves, blurring lines between autobiography and fantasy. Fake black belt masters who bought their ranks from McDojos. Martial arts students sometimes discover their grandmaster bought belts, not earned them. So-called McDojos focus more on monthly fees than serious training. In some cases, instructors purchase certificates from distant, barely real federations. They lined dojo walls with impressive calligraphy and foreign-sounding titles. Students broke flimsy boards, earned colored belts, and never sparred competitively. Visiting fighters occasionally expose these masters during embarrassing public demonstrations. Videos of failed techniques and staged attacks then spread online quickly. Real instructors warned students to check competition records and recognized associations. The wrong black belt can turn self-defense class into expensive choreography practice. Honorary consuls, using diplomatic titles to impress and swindle locals. Sometimes the word diplomat on a business card becomes a con artist's shield. Honorary consuls are local citizens representing foreign countries part-time. They often receive car plates, small privileges, and impressive-sounding titles. Most quietly help with visas, trade, or cultural events in their region. A few, however, have abused the role to impress business partners. They flash consular IDs while negotiating questionable deals or dodging minor trouble. Investigations in several countries uncovered consuls linked to smuggling or corruption. Foreign ministries responded by tightening rules and revoking many honorary appointments. These cases show how even half-official titles can tempt people toward dangerous shortcuts.